Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Green Disruptors Scaling the Future, the podcast where we spotlight innovators reimagining the future of our planet and creating the business solutions to make that possible. Today, I'm joined by a visionary who spent decades on the front lines of environmental innovation. He tackled Amazon deforestation in the 80s, and he launched one of the earliest biodiversity mapping expeditions. And now he's building a scalable, climate-smart materials company in the American Southwest. Brando Crespi is the founder of Global Biocarbons, a company transforming wildfire-burnt forests into powerful biochar-based alternatives to fossil fuel-derived materials like carbon black. From regenerative agriculture to low-carbon plastics and cement, his work is a masterclass in systems thinking and circular design. Let's dive into Brando's incredible journey across continents, causes, and climate breakthroughs. Hi, Brando. Thanks for joining us on Green Disruptors today.
Hi, Megan. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Tell us, first of all, where in the world you are.
I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico now, and I lived part of a year here. I discovered New Mexico at the beginning of COVID. I was looking for a place to take refuge and was immediately struck by the beauty and spirit of this land.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to be here. I spend a lot of time in New York because my wife teaches there and for other good reasons, and part of the time in Europe where I was born and spent most of my life. So
What part of Europe?
I was born in Rome, and actually I
Wow.
was born in Switzerland, raised in Rome, went to school in Switzerland and uh, Oxford, and then came to America at Georgetown, then went back, and then lived in South America. And it's it's a wondrous life of exploration and discoveries and all kinds of great things.
Well, you have got an especially interesting story, and you've been making disruptive climate moves all along. So we're really excited to talk to you. I love what you said, though, about kind of the ability to fall in love with different places. Like the world has so much diversity, but like you can really just find yourself drawn to a particular place at a particular time. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a mysterious alchemical process how we
Yeah.
connect to people and places on a real level beyond the kind of rational self. And
Yeah.
so
It's great.
anyway, here we are.
Yeah. So tell us, give us a little bit of the cliff notes on the all the things that you've been doing to try to make climate impacts. It's a long story, so give us the highlights.
I'll try and keep it short. And it's still very much ongoing.
Yes.
So, where are we? Let's see. In the mid 80s, I was in LA. I had discovered a wonderful niche for myself in America, which was marketing all the Italian luxury, but most of the Italian luxury brands. So I launched Rodeo and put Versace and Fendi and then, on the Rodeo Drive and all of that. And then at some point I became a little impatient with that whole worldview and decided to really focus on environmental developmental issues. And I also have a Brazilian passport. I spent quite a bit of time in Brazil. And there we were asked to open WWF, which we could not for political reasons. In 85, with my friend Marcelo Andrade, we opened an NGO called Pro Natura, which started addressing some of the problems in the Amazon, deforestation and so on. And then after 92, which was the Rio conference on biodiversity, I moved to Paris to head Earth Day International, and then, well, Earth Day in Europe, and then to open an office for Pro Natura to develop or to deploy some of what we learned in the Amazon, in Africa, and in Asia. And that eventually led us to winning the Mitchell Prize, which at the time, which was 97, was considered the Nobel of Sustainability. And to doing, a lot of interesting work. We did the 13 biggest expeditions to study biodiversity in the world, and developed all kind of beautiful flying devices to explore the canopies of rainforests. Um,
That
and
definitely sounds like something out of a novel to me.
Great fun, let me tell. Lots of
Yeah,
adventures.
yeah,
And sadly enough, since we stopped for all kinds of other reasons we won't go into now, nobody's taken our place. So while we're experiencing this dramatic loss of biodiversity, nobody is yet mapping it, on a global
yeah,
scale, especially in what are called the hotspots, which are the most biodiverse places on the planet, which paradoxically are also the most endangered.
yeah.
But at the same time, as we're working with with communities and cooperatives on developmental issues, and we ended up deploying about 1.6 million euros, which is, well, billion euros, which is, I don't know, close to $2 billion dollars today, in 63 countries, primarily teaching people how to grow food,
Wow.
because we realized that food security was one of the main causes of social upheaval, but also very connected to climate issues and and biodiversity. And during that, I discovered, really by chance, something called biochar, which today has been called the black gold, which is a
Black
technique,
gold. Yep.
or a product which Amazonian Indians discovered many, many decades, not decades, millennia ago.
Millennia. Yeah.
Um,
Long time
and
ago.
and essentially what they did is they took ground charcoal and mixed it into the soil. And what that did, it created an incredibly fertile soil. And that allowed for the creation of cities in the Amazon, which today we know were bigger than London in the 14th
Yeah.
century, certainly cleaner than then. So in 97, we created a biochar project in Senegal, and I became an evangelist, of this strange black powder which you mix into the soil. And what we discovered in the Sahel, in lower Sahara, is in Mali, Burkina, Senegal, other places, is that we could take desert Sahara sand, use biochar and camel dung, and create 11 harvests a year. And that
Wow.
was extraordinary,
That is
because it really
extraordinary.
dealt um, with the food security of communities which were already being impacted by climate change.
Yeah.
And anyway, going fast forward, at some point, I fell in love with this wonderful American woman, came back to the US. I was based in Paris. And then at the beginning of COVID, discovered that Santa Fe was a magnificent, miraculous place to take refuge. And here in 22, I witnessed this extraordinary fire called the Hermit Peak Fire, which was the largest fire in the history of New Mexico, and which burnt 360,000 acres. And I said, I know why I'm here. I have to create a biochar company. Anyway, that was a great idea, but one which was very difficult to really deploy, because biochar is still a fairly esoteric product. in the US, actually probably worldwide. And so I was afraid that, I could very easily access all that biomass from the burnt forest, but then I would process it and end up being stuck with this mountain of biochar because farmers are traditionally very conservative. And while this, boosts productivity and cuts down on water use, and
It's
it's
just not
perfect
something
for
they're familiar
designated
with.
soil, still, there are not too many farmers using it yet. So one day I woke up and had a kind of epiphany and discovered I'd been looking at the trees and not at the forest. And that actually what I could do was create products which competed with something called carbon black, which is a very polluting, also known as soot. But that's a $27 billion business because anything you see around you, which is dark, most of the things you see around you, like ink or black plastics or black, dyes
You're saying
on
cosmetics.
tires, that's all carbon black. And
Yeah.
it's a fossil fuel based product. And I said, why not do biocarbons? And so that's what we're doing now.
That's quite the journey. I gotta back up 2 steps and then we'll talk more about carbon black. And anyway, uh, I love how you spent so much time studying biodiversity, and it seems to me like that's where you learned to be a systems thinker. And like a lot of these climate solutions, like you're taking, the char plus the camel dung that's already in the region, and you're just using what you have in a way that, and it's like you're never just thinking about, okay, well, we can boost the yield on the crops. It's like it's affecting the economies, it's affecting the food supply. Like y- I can just tell, like you're thinking about all the steps in the process.
Yeah. I met Bucky Fuller in London when I was 19. I had such a hard time following him. He was so much smarter than me. But I did get a lot from him, um, including this focus on systems thinking.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And,
The
and
more people I talk to in climate, you that it has to be that way because
yeah,
anything that's
yeah,
circular, you have to mimic nature, and nature is built in systems. So it's pretty interesting
absolutely.
to hear.
Absolutely. And
So back to the current, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, steering us back towards where the conversation is headed. So getting companies to use a biochar to dye these plastics and all these products that we don't even realize have that carbon black in it. I mean, that's such a huge opportunity. How do you narrow in on that and get something started?
Well, indeed it is because, when you're dealing with a $27 billion industry,
Right.
the opportunities are great, but also you're dealing with entrenched interests and not invented here and all the usual um, de-risking mentality that traditional business has. Um, but there are some things which are very much in our favor. One of them is that most carbon black imported into the US comes or came from Russia,
Mm,
China, and India, and from coal
yeah.
plants. And
Yep.
so that is, there's supply chain challenges because of all of that. And secondly, that the world is trying to decarbonize. Well, not the whole world. There are plenty of people who are lost
There are
in
people in
whatever
each part of the world that are trying, and some people that aren't
illusion,
trying. And
of everyday normality that they live in.
yeah.
But having said that, um, the Europe has very much led the way in the creation of.
Mhm.
So today there are, if you want to import or sell in Europe, you have to demonstrate that you have decarbonized your products, primarily cement and steel now, but next
Hmm.
year plastics. Um, and that's kind of hard for a lot of companies. Um, but that is very much a motivation for for the regulatory framework helps bring innovation to deal with status quo. All of a sudden, it's more expensive to maintain what
To
the
keep the status
habitual, the
quo, that's, yeah.
everyday, traditional ways. So the plastics industry in particular has a big problem decarbonizing. Steel has been using biochar, which is essentially compressed, or green charcoal, which is compressed biochar, um, to use it as a regenerative is not the right word, energy source of a. So anyway, they have decarbonized their energy, and then they use some biochars, biocarbons in the actual steel to improve the
Hmm.
quality. And the same thing is happening in cement because cement is one of the biggest industries in the world. I think it's responsible for 11% of global greenhouse gases. And what's happening there is that the moment you add biochar or biocarbons to cement, not only do you decarbonize it, but you actually improve the technical capabilities of that cement. And interesting enough, the same thing happens with plastics. Uh, it improves the actual plastics and
That's
it
crazy.
decreases the amount of plastics which eventually become microplastics. And until
Mm.
we find a real solution to substituting plastics, at least it's a step in the right direction, right? And we
Yeah.
think that we can substitute about 30% of the fossil fuel based compounds that go into plastics, to dark plastics, with bio materials. And then finally, there is the big kind of holy grail at the end of this search, which is to create conductive biocarbons, which are nanotubes and things like that, and biographene, biographite, and all of those are very much the elements of our future economy and already used in batteries and in all kinds of electronic devices. And the moment we can substitute carbon black um, and other things with a bio-based conductive material, well, that's another step in the right direction.
Yeah. So how does this work as far as the business model goes? Like, are you building a processing plant to create the biochar, and then you need to find buyers like um,
Yeah,
manufacturers, and is that how it works?
yeah, essentially what we do because we are trying to obviously pay a lot of attention on our supply chain, also
Hmm.
because we will be generating carbon credits, although that's not the main source of income.
Hmm.
So we try to put, well, we are putting our plant right in or next to a timber yard, a timber company, and using the sawdust. So that allows us at 0 kilometers, so to speak, to get access to biomass. And this biomass is all from this burnt forest because there's 62
Yeah,
million trunks of trees
that's going to
which are
last a while.
charred in the mountains of New Mexico. And so we process them, and we have a proprietary approaches to doing all of this. And what we get at the other end of the process is this really fine micronized powder, which then we can ship to Texas, where there is a plastic compounder who wants to use it. And essentially, we hope to be selling as of the beginning of next year. And
Okay.
we're being told that the market for that is going to be enormous.
So what are the next steps? I mean, obviously, once you're ready to go to market, that's going to be a whole crazy ride. But what do you need to do from now until then to make sure you're ready?
Well, what we're doing is we're growing cautiously, if you want. We're starting with a relatively small plant actually a very small plant, um, which will generate about a ton of biocarbons a day. And but that allows us to use machinery which is already in the US, so we don't have to deal with import quotas and duties and all tariffs and all that, and allows us to move very, very quickly. It also, a smaller plant, which next year we will, inshallah, grow significantly, um, will allow us to start creating materials that then we can bring to Los Alamos and Sandia, with whom we're negotiating, well, we're discussing a R&D collaboration to develop advanced materials from it. So the first stage essentially allows us to test the system, to start developing different products, because though the feedstock is the same, by changing processing parameters, you can change what comes out on the other end. Everything from a biochar that we can inoculate with very interesting and proprietary products from green chemistry to these advanced conductive materials. Um, and But it also, allows us to engage with the local uh, population and political entities and so on, and to to start, testing a process which we want to scale up, and then eventually I already have 7 other sites in mind where we want to build other plants.
Yeah. So do you think your initial market is going to be a European market?
No, no, no. It's going to be probably the text and plastic industry and cement
Hmm.
industry.
Yeah, very
Because,
cool.
yeah, because cement is, obviously used in everything. But one of the things that we want to do is use proprietary cement formulation that we're developing, um, to cap orphan wells, because there's an enormous amount of methane emerging from these wells, which are very badly capped, and or which are not even capped, just left spewing methane and greenhouse gases. So when you do cap them with traditional cement, that after a few years leaks, and so we want to address that. So another climate opportunity, climate mitigation
Yeah.
opportunity, and probably the low-hanging fruit, because methane is 28 times worse than CO2. Sometimes you can calculate it to be a lot more than that even. And then, we're going to see the explosion of geothermal energy, because this government wants to nurture that um, process, and that will use a lot of cement. We want to start with people who are doing green buildings and green developments, but also um, deal with the oil and gas industry, because we can help decarbonize them. And stranger enough, they're interested in decarbonizing, some more than others, um, and also address some of the upcoming challenges the new markets present.
Yeah. That sounds so cool. So in these kind of green industries in general. I think sales cycles and, what you would call client acquisition is a long process because people are making really big changes to the way they operate. Do you see yourself starting to form these connections with cement companies now, even before everything's, ready to go?
Well, it's, business is a lot a question of, well, life is really a question of timing. So you don't want to
Yeah, it's true.
do things too early, but actually, my life has been a succession of challenges brought by a combination of enthusiasm and being an early adapter or an early innovator. And there are intrinsic problems to that kind of role. Um, so,
Yeah.
profits end up um, kind of in deserts, communicating their vision to the wind.
Yeah. Well, hey, you're in Santa Fe. That fits in the desert.
Yeah, it's so the issue is to grow as organically as possible, but at the same time we know that we're dealing with enormous opportunities.
Yeah.
Right now we're finishing our financing and are ready to go.
Is there a name for the company?
Yeah, Global Biocarbons.
I didn't even ask you that. Okay, Global Biocarbons. Very cool.
Yeah.
So it
And
seems
then
to me like,
obviously because, of my background and my work, um, we want to scale to worldwide. Already have a number of people interested in Africa, Europe, Asia, and South America.
yeah. So now it is the time, you got to get all those things taken care of, but you can start getting people excited about it. I think you can start the prophetic voices now and then you can do that organically, successfully, and then people are going to be in line when it's ready to go.
Yeah, and these are extraordinary solutions. And one of my frustrations, because I've been involved in climate issues since the early 80s, actually. And we knew all these problems that today, at least most of us are aware of. We knew about them then. And what I've seen over the decades is that we have all the solutions. And it's
Hmm.
very paradoxical, because,
Yeah.
I mean, Kurt Vonnegut said we're probably going to go extinct because it's not cost effective to keep us alive as a species. Yeah?
Well,
As
that's terrible.
it is a
Oh,
terrible thought, and obviously it's not going to happen that way. But I do see people in the financial community who are trained to think about de-risking everything, and meanwhile they're losing sight of the context, which is they may de-risk that investment, but they're not de-risking the economic challenges that are before us
right.
and the social impact of those challenges. Um, so you already see 60 million climate migrants around the world, and probably the number is higher today. And wars like the Syrian civil war really started out of climate change problems, of droughts and so on. So, um, I'd like business to be more ballsy. Sorry about the
It needs to be.
masculine
No, it's all right.
metaphor, but I think women understand this much better than men. But men are very often. When I was in Europe, I was on the board of B Corp, which is an organization which nurtures social, environmental engagement of companies, and there are now 6,000 companies part of B Corp. But one of the things that these CEOs were always complaining about was having to retrain people coming out of business schools because
Mm,
that created a mindset which was profoundly extractive. And what we need to do is develop a whole new paradigm which is collaborative and which is willing and able to challenge some of the um, axioms, well, some of the basic understandings or that we have accepted as truths.
Yeah.
And until we do that, we're not going to change much.
Yeah. Well, I'm an optimist by nature. The more people I talk to in business, especially in climate business, I think it is becoming more collaborative. And I think the younger generations too are definitely not viewing competition in the same way. It's like, let me help you, you help me, and we can do we're more powerful together. So I have hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is endless examples of the power of collaboration at all levels, and that's something which I think this country really needs to nurture because
Yeah, for many
we
reasons.
are being polarized and the reality is that does not serve us in any way. We need to find what we have in common, including being on this small planet, beautiful, magnificent jewel in space, and trying to keep it as rich and beautiful as it is.
Yeah. Boy, I think that's a powerful note to end on. That was perfect. Well, thank
Yeah.
you for your vision and your lifetime of work, and really excited to see this thing explode in a good way.
Well, listen, it all started with biochar because, well, if it started somewhere, it started with biochar, which I kind of stumbled into because at the time we had discovered that the creation of charcoal in Africa was responsible for 70% of the deforestation. So we decided to create a green charcoal. And then, so we put our hands in our pockets and created a site in northern Senegal to take rice husks, which were wasted, burnt, and turn them into a charcoal, and won a big prize for that. And it discovered that we were actually producing biochar. And at the time, I had no idea what biochar was, although I'd been plenty of times in the Amazon. And so now, the need for biochar hasn't gone away, it's only increased. But until big pharma and and um, and farmers all over realize how powerful that is, I can um, transform biomass into biocarbons and use some of the profits to teach farmers, especially agronomists, how to use this worldwide.
Yeah. Well, it's going to happen, and I'm excited to see it. So thanks so
Thank
much for
you.
joining me today, Brando.
Thank you, Megan. Take care.
Okay. You too.
Many thanks to Brando Crespi, founder of Global Biocarbons, for sharing this time and conversation with me, and a true pioneer in environmental development. If you were inspired by his story, make sure to follow Green Disruptors wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you know someone who's working to reshape the future through climate innovation, send them this episode. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay curious and stay committed to building a better world. This podcast was brought to you by Mountaintop Social Marketing, your partner in scaling climate solutions.